Hello, and welcome back to part 3 of our video series on data protection in research practice. In the last video, we have dealt with the principles of the GDPR, and we have learned about the key roles along with their rights and obligations as defined in the GDPR. In this video, we will take a look at what impact the GDPR has on science and research. This means that in this video, we will deal with the following question. How can data be processed for archiving purposes as well as for scientific or historical research purposes in a GDPR-compliant manner? Within this context, we will highlight the GDPR's exemptions that were formulated in favor of archiving purposes and scientific or historical research purposes. The GDPR contains certain exemptions for science, research, and archiving. These exemptions, for specific processing situations, are defined amongst others in the Articles 85 and 89. For example, Article 85, paragraph 2 states, "For processing carried out for journalistic purposes or the purpose of academic, artistic, or literary expression, member states shall provide for exemptions or derogations, if they are necessary to reconcile the right to the protection of personal data with the freedom of expression and information." And Article 89, paragraph 2 states, "Where personal data are processed for scientific or historical research purposes or statistical purposes, Union or member state law may provide for derogations from the rights referred to in Articles 15, right to be informed, 16, right to rectification, 18, right to restrict processing, and 21, right to object, subject to the conditions and safeguards referred to in paragraph 1 of this article, insofar as such rights are likely to render impossible or seriously impair the achievement of the specific purposes, and such derogations are necessary for the fulfillment of those purposes." In concrete terms, this means that certain rights of the data subjects cannot be applied if the research purpose for which the data was collected, for example, a study that is based on the personal data of data subjects, can no longer be fulfilled. Although it is not explicitly mentioned in Article 85 or 89, Article 17, the right to erasure or the right to be forgotten, is also affected by these exemptions. This information can be found in Article 17 itself, under paragraph 3d. Of course, this does not mean that you can handle data any way you like, thereby completely disregarding the rights of the data subjects. The principles of the GDPR must always be respected and followed. And even though in this context the data processing is classified as a specific processing situation, you still have to make sure that the data is protected, for example by using appropriate technical safeguards, by practicing pseudonymization of the data, by following an appropriate code of conduct, and so forth. But what impact do these exemptions now have on data processing in science and research? In a scientific context, these exemptions make it possible to obtain broader consent for data processing. That means you can obtain consent not only for one specific purpose, but for one or more research areas all at once. In addition to that, any scientific purpose is generally considered to be a legitimate purpose. So, if you have legitimately collected personal data for a scientific purpose, for example by obtaining consent from the data subjects with a consent form, you can reuse that data in another research context without having to explicitly ask all data subjects for consent again. Furthermore, personal data collected for purposes in accordance with Article 89 can be stored for a longer period of time. If the data is anonymized and therefore not subject to the GDPR, it can even be stored indefinitely. And the data subject's rights to erasure or objection are partially restricted, for example when it comes to exam or research data, if those rights seriously interfere with the purpose of their processing or if they make it impossible. For example, if a scientific study in the public interest could not be concluded due to the withdrawal of consent by the study participants or the demand to have their data deleted before the study is finished, those demands can be rejected. With that, we have almost reached the end of the third part of our video series. Time for a little recapitulation of the most important points of this video. So, what do we know now about the impact of the GDPR on science and research? Data processing for scientific research purposes counts as a specific processing situation. Exemptions for science, research and archiving are defined in Article 85 and 89 of the GDPR. The exemption applying to Article 17, right to erasure, is defined in the article itself. In a scientific context, these exemptions mean, among other things, that you can obtain broader consent for more than one specific purpose of data processing, that the collected data can be stored for a longer period of time, and that any scientific purpose is generally considered to be a legitimate purpose. But even though these exemptions exist, you always have to respect and follow the principles of the GDPR. Now that we are done with our theoretical input, we can also mark the third part of our video series on data protection in research practice as completed. In the next, and also last video of the series, we will finally get to try out the LDAR consent form wizard. As always, you can find further material and useful links in the description below. Thanks for watching and see you next time.